Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power of Man podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. I know you know that. I just like to remind myself about how grateful I am to be sitting in this chair. Folks, you have done so much to help this podcast. I am eternally grateful. When we went to 5 days a week, you folks churned out and just went berserk. When we went to 7 days a week, the support was just absolutely overwhelming. Our Sunday episodes now are among our highest, and you folks really, really have come through more than I ever could have dreamed of. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you're not out there doing what you're doing, liking and subscribing and everything else, I can't sit over here doing what I'm doing. So thanks. Now, if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, you know what time it is, and that's right, it's time to pay a couple of bills. So let me take a sip of my preferred beverage. Ooh, man, that's fantastic stuff. You guys all know what we're drinking. That's right, it's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Look them up, check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. They brew a mean cup of joe. It's absolutely fantastic. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans, which is one of the biggest reasons why we support them. And you guys all know how important veterans are, including the gentleman we have here with us today, folks here at the Power Man Podcast. If you're a veteran out there, thank you for your service. We love you. And we're really glad that you found a home here at the Power Man Podcast. You're welcome. Folks, go check them out. Freedom Hill Coffee, at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Tell them Power Man sent you. Now, let me get one more sip of this so I can keep up with this, guy on the other side of the table from me because he's a dynamo. I'm telling you right now. All right, there we go. I'll be drinking that through the whole thing. All right, we have a rare treat, and we have an active duty military person with us today. Please welcome to the show, submarine warfare officer, military philosopher, author of the book Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy, Commander William C. Spears. Commander Spears, how are you doing today, sir?
I am excellent, Rory. Thank you so much. I'm very blessed to be here today. Hey, before I get down track here, I need to go ahead and say that I'm just here as William C. Spears. I'm not speaking for the Navy or any government organization. Basically anything that I say is my own personal opinion. And if I endorse some hyperlink or some product or something like that, that also is just my personal opinion, doesn't constitute a government endorsement of that thing. That's one of those things I have to say because if I don't, I will inevitably say some dumb thing, and some people will, someone out there will think, oh, the Navy said this, and nope, this is just me. I'm sitting in my basement.
I got you. I got you. I appreciate the disclaimer. I know we
So,
have a lot of veterans in our audience, and so I'm sure they all understand exactly what you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm coming to you right now from my basement in Washington D.C. I am, as Rory said, I'm a submarine warfare officer. I have about 20 years in the Navy. I joined the Navy. I enlisted right out of high school from Central Louisiana. I come from a small town in Louisiana. Just joined like right after graduating high school, shipped out to the Navy, and basically as soon as I got in the Navy, I started just applying for whatever schools I could get into. By some weird circumstance, I ended up at the Naval Academy and went that route, commissioned as an officer, and went into nuclear submarines. And so I have spent plenty of time on various submarines. I've been formally assigned to three. I've done two tours on attack submarines, and my most recent tour was as the executive officer, the second in command of a ballistic missile submarine. And now I'm on shore duty in between. I'm working at the Pentagon right now, pushing spreadsheets around. It's quite a bit different level of excitement. And then here in a couple of years, sometime in the next year or so, hopefully I'll be going back to sea. We'll stand by and see what the Navy decides to do with me. So
Wow.
that's what I'm doing and where I'm at right now.
Wow. I mean, submarines is not something you hear every day, for sure.
No.
If I may channel my inner 12-year-old just for a moment, first of all, that's really cool. But second of all, um, I cannot imagine living in a submarine type thing because I mean, I'm claustrophobic in a small room. So, I mean, I don't know how you guys do that. Is that something you train for, or is that kind of like you just have to not be claustrophobic to
So
start?
the funny thing is, people always ask about the claustrophobia,
Okay.
and the claustrophobia isn't really a problem almost ever. You do have people who don't adjust well. But that's usually due to the stress of the workload or something. Just the amount of stuff that's going on. It's a very very busy environment, and so the easiest way I can sum up what it's like to work on a submarine is it is extremely busy. You know,
Wow.
basically the man to equipment ratio is just off the charts in terms of the amount of gear and kit that you have to keep running, and keeping a nuclear submarine happy and healthy as a organism is just a constant battle,
Wow.
because it's just so much equipment then and maintenance, and then on top of that is the training that you've got to do to operate that reactor plant safely and operate the ship safely. You are never you are never not training, or
Nice.
maintaining or fixing something,
Nice.
and that's just and so that's what it's like underway. You don't really have time to think about like, oh man, I really wish I could see the sunlight, because you just look at your list of things to do and you're like, God, I'm busy. I've got a lot to do.
That's
Yeah.
great. That is great. Okay, you unpacked a lot just in your first couple of sentences. The You left high school, went straight into the Navy.
Mhm.
Was that sort of like I don't have options, I want to go to the Navy, or is it this is the option I really want going to the Navy?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I didn't really know quite what I wanted to do. I did know I didn't really fit in a small town in Louisiana, and like I don't hunt, I don't fish, I don't care about LSU football. I don't say
Wow.
that too loudly, but like I none of those things, were what I was about at any point. So the Navy seemed like a really good option to get some technical training and to get a path to education, and it was absolutely true. It turned out to be wonderful for me. It doesn't work out as well for everyone as it does for me, but it just could not have worked out any better for me, and it's been a wonderful career. There have definitely been times that I've hated it. There's been times where I say, hey, I can't wait to get out of the Navy, I can't wait to quit. And I've you always come out on the other side of the dark spots wanting more. And at this stage, I'm institutionalized. I'm like the guys in Shawshank Redemption that just like I don't want to grow up and get a real job. I don't. That sounds hard. I don't,
I'll say 20 years. Yeah, exactly.
I'm at some point I'm going to age out of driving ships, and then I'm going to have to figure something out. But I'm not there yet. So.
So you
Uh,
choose the Navy, and then you hit the Naval Academy. And so I mean at that
mhm.
point, I mean you've got a lot of options, I'm assuming at that point. What makes the kid from Louisiana who doesn't like to hunt, doesn't want to fish and everything else, say, you know what, I want to go underwater?
So I didn't. I basically when I enlisted, I wanted to do just whatever was the hardest technical thing I could do, and that was really just on advice of basically my dad. Told me, hey, if you can put up with the military, then you can really set yourself up in life. And so just try to get as much training and education as you can. So I said, okay, well, go into the whatever's the most technical, the most training I can do. So I enlisted into the nuclear power program, where you train to be a technician in the nuclear power plant of either a submarine or an aircraft carrier, and that's 2 years of school before you ever go to sea. Anyway, it's just a ton of training, because you go to your technical specialty, whether you're a mechanic or electrician or whatever, and then you go to nuclear power school, where you learn all the theory, and then you go into a practical training where they actually have a propulsion plant set up in a building, and you learn how to operate the equipment like that before you ever even get to the ship. So it's a long pipeline, and it was during all that. And so during that community, I got exposed to the submarine guys, and I said, you know what, I like this submarine thing. I think that's what I want to do. And I volunteered. Okay, I'll go subs while I was in the nuclear power pipeline. But then when I went to, I got picked up for the academy before I ever made it to a sub. And the academy is like a clean slate as an officer program, because now suddenly you're in this completely different world, and now like Top Gun is a possibility. You're everyone wants to be a fighter pilot, and, or I could go be a surface ship driver, or go be a Marine Corps officer. Just any, like, the possibilities are endless. It's a clean slate. And where what really made me say, uh, they have this. I did not come on expecting to talk about this. There is a every year there is the submarine birthday ball, and it's a formal, it's just a formal affair where you dress up and get a date, and there's speeches and stuff like that. And so I said the submarine birthday ball was at the academy, and I said, all right, I am going to go to that because it sounds like something to do, and I can ask someone to go with me. And the person I asked to go with me is now upstairs taking care of my kids and waiting for me to come and join the rest of the family. But the I'm at this event, and they, you're all sitting at these different tables, and they're serving dinner and everything, but they have interspersed at all these tables these really old, so just some old men, and I'm sitting down, and there's this wrinkled old guy in the chair next to me, and I'm just like, man, who's this dude? Like, oh, God, this guy's gonna start wanting to tell me his life story, and I'm gonna have to sit here and put up with it. And so, of course, that happens. But it turns out that the story he starts telling me is how whenever he was 25 and was selected to command a submarine in World War II, this
Wow.
was during a time where if you didn't sink enough ships, you would be fired, you know, and it was absolutely insane what those guys went through and what those guys did in World War II in the submarine force. Absolutely wrecked the enemy. And I mean, it got they destroyed everything on the water, such that it got to the point where you had landing parties going ashore with just the demolition charges on the ship and blowing up trains because they were just getting creative. That's how nuts it was. And I'm sitting here next to this wrinkled old dude, and I'm just like, no matter what I ever do, I'm not going to amount to a wart on this guy's butt. And I'm just like, at that point, I'm just like, okay, submarines, like this is home. This is where I belong. And it's dark. It's weird. It's a bunch of weirdos. It's very, very technical. It's a bunch of nerds, and it's a bunch of nerds that study the highest, most technical form of combat you can imagine, and it's basically the most sophisticated form of violence in service of your country that you can come up with, and that's
Wow.
just where I was at home, and that's
Wow.
where I've always been at home.
Wow. Well, whoever came up with the idea of putting all the old guys out at the different tables,
That was brilliant.
obviously
Yeah,
knew what they were doing.
yeah.
So that's fantastic. The now as you're doing this, how long were you in the submarines themselves, or are you still? Because I think you just said you were thinking about going back out.
That's right. So I'm in. So basically, the way the officer career path works is you'll spend a few years assigned to a submarine, and then you spend a couple of years ashore, kind of recovering. And you can't be assigned to submarines forever because it's really grueling just on everything, you know. And so you spend a couple of years ashore in a school or an office somewhere, and then you go back and do a tour as a higher level person. So your first tour, you're a division officer. So I was, in charge of the reactor controls division, and then I was the assistant weapons officer as a junior officer. And then I went ashore. I went to grad school, got an MBA, and then came back as the weapons officer of the submarine. So now I'm in charge of multiple divisions, and I have, I'm responsible for all the combat systems, the torpedoes, the sonar system, fire control, and all that. Like basically a third of the ship is what I'm responsible for at that point. And then I go ashore again, go to some more school, spend some time on an inspection team, which was fascinating. I can talk about that forever. And then I went back to a different class of submarine as the executive officer, the second in command. And so my first two submarines were attack submarines. And so they go out and they're kind of multi-purpose ships. Anything that you can think that would be useful to do with an invisible warship is what you do with attack submarines.
Hmm.
And then as a executive officer, for the first time, I went to a ballistic missile submarine, which those ships do one thing, and they do it really, really well. And they go and they wait,
Got you.
and they're ready.
Got you.
Yeah.
100%. I understand. Loud and clear. All right. So, I mean, obviously, this is something that you really have enjoyed, that you seem to have a passion for, and what you're doing because you're still doing it all these
Yeah.
years later. So, congratulations on that. Fantastic decisions. So, at some point, because none of this sounds odd, right now to anybody who's listening to it, what sounds a little bit different, than the normal path is that here's this guy goes out, right? Navy, uh, the academy, subs, challenging himself, working hard, wants to blow stuff up. Gotcha. It's all good, right? Inspired by the old guy at the table, but he decides to write a book, right? And not only that, but he writes a book while he's still active duty. So I'm dying to know, how do you go from what you're doing to saying, I'm going to go write a book on this topic? There's a disconnect there for me, and I know we had to get more information. So, is Stoicism something that has always been part of you? Was this a new thing that came along? What inspired you to write the book with all of this here?
So I picked up Stoicism. I learned about that while I was at the academy.
Okay.
Learning deciding to write the book was something that happened kind of in the middle of my career, but it happened a long time ago. Like people ask, how in the world do you balance a career and a family and staying in shape and write a book? And it's like, well, you start 10 years ago. That's how. you know. So it's been a long time coming. But where I discovered Stoicism was while I was at the Naval Academy, kind of 2004 is whenever I started there. And coming to the academy as a prior enlisted guy, you already feel out of place because the reputations of the service academies, whether it's the Air Force Academy or West Point or Annapolis, they have this reputation of being a thing for like rich kids and senators' kids and stuff like that. And you have some amount of that because there's a political there's an advantage if you have political connections. It makes it slight. There's a slight advantage to getting in, but it's not as much as it's blown up to be. What the academies are really for is they're meant to be a cross section of America, and they largely are. So I was not the only kid there that came from middle class. There were, I would say, the most of the people there are from middle class. The rich kids, they're really going to Harvard and Stanford and stuff like that. They're not going
Yeah.
to the service academies. So the but as a freshman there, as a guy from small town Louisiana, I'm like, man, I am going to get discovered at any moment. They're going to kick me out because I have no business in this environment. And so you immediately start saying, okay, I've got to learn about this and learn what is the legacy I'm inheriting here. And so you start studying the heroes, and there's a great pantheon of heroes in the service academies, especially. One of the most famous and kind of favorites of the Naval Academy is this guy named Vice Admiral James Stockdale. Stockdale was shot down in Vietnam. He was the air group commander of. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and he was the commander of the air group flying a mission, and was shot down and captured by the enemy in North Vietnam, and found himself in the prison system, and it's kind of a torture camp as a prisoner of war. Well, not only is he a prisoner of war, but he is the senior prisoner of war immediately. And so he basically has to take charge of his environment and lead the rest of his countrymen. And their purpose is to basically survive this environment and survive this torture and exploitation environment with their honor intact. Because what the prison system would do, they would torture them into basically getting on camera and saying that they're all guilty of war crimes and that the war is criminal, and they would air this stuff back in the States to undermine the will to continue the war effort. It was strategically brilliant. It was also devastating to the individuals because you can torture a man into anything. No one can withstand that. Everyone everyone breaks eventually, and he was basically in charge of this environment. He found himself in this environment, and he was in charge of it. Well, he turned out to be extremely good at being the right guy to be in charge in that environment. He was extremely resilient, extremely resistant to the various methods that the enemy employed, and part of that ability of his was in his that he would later write and speak about was his philosophical upbringing and his philosophical background. Before he went out and did that tour, he did a lot of reading of philosophy whenever he was in his graduate school, and he basically was mentored by a professor who introduced him especially to Stoic philosophy.
Wow.
And so in his later in life, so he was later. There were several things that happened in the POW situation whenever he was in charge. He was eventually awarded the Medal of Honor whenever he came back, and the his Medal of Honor citation doesn't really capture it. The full situation, but there was a situation where he was basically caught communicating, and he knew that they were going to torture him into giving up his whole communication network, and then they would torture other guys and other guys would die. And so he attempted suicide while he was in prison. They found him with his wrist slashed, where he had broken a window with his elbow and slashed his wrist, and they found him and they resuscitated him and saved him before he could die. But they stopped torturing at that point, and a lot of his fellow countrymen attribute his actions to saving their lives. And so that's what the Medal of Honor citation says. There's a lot more to it. I wrote a pretty quick read article on it that we can put in the show notes for
Great.
listeners who are interested to
Absolutely.
know. Yeah. But I mean, Stockdale's a very interesting character. But anyway, he went on and continued his Navy career, became the president of the Naval War College, became a vice admiral, and was really into, in that capacity, he would teach classes himself, and that's not a normal thing to do as the president of the Naval War College. But he specifically taught philosophy and emphasized moral philosophy, and he was particularly emphatic about this obscure Roman philosopher named Epictetus, who was a Stoic, and he taught and wrote about how Stoic philosophy informed his leadership experience in the prison situation. And you just could not have picked a more surreptitious, a more appropriate right guy at the right time for that right situation. As much as that must have sucked for him,
Right.
he was the guy for that job. And anyway, reading into that, I immediately was like, oh, Stockdale's the dude. I've got to learn everything about this guy. And then so I started reading about Stoicism, and I'm like, oh, this is how I think anyway. It's very, the rationality, the morality of it all resonated with the way I thought logically, or at least the way I thought. And I just read everything I could about it. And that's where I got into Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and the other Stoics from there.
Nice.
And then, okay. So, I read everything I could on these guys, and then I went on with my career, and I kind of assumed I knew everything that there was to know at that point, and moved on with my career. And then I came out of my junior officer tour, and like, while you're on a submarine, you're so busy, you're not really engaging with social media, and it's almost, you're just head down working your butt off all the time. You're either at sea, or when you're in port, you don't have time to goof around looking at blogs and stuff. And so it was whenever I was in grad school after that, and I'm like, I start writing on leadership, just trying to download and get because I've always liked to write, I'm trying to get my brain straight and capture all the lessons learned and everything. And I start researching about leadership, and somewhere in that process, I stumbled across a Stoicism blog, and then realized that in the years since I had left the academy, Stoicism had just exploded in the public sphere as a popular phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so, and there were arguments about, obviously it's resonant with military culture, but there are arguments out there about, hey, is it even really compatible with military culture, or is the military, this bad this bad thing, the military out there trying to appropriate Stoicism for its own purposes. And then, there's people out there who make that argument.
Sure.
I at some point decided, like, I started reading into it and digging into it. And I was like, someone needs to write a book on this, just to straighten this out. And that ended up being, I waited eventually. I kept thinking somebody's going to write on this eventually. And no one did. And so eventually I just gave myself permission to get started. And, it took forever. And the project evolved and changed over the years, but it eventually came to be, a product I'm pretty proud of.
Nice. Nice. I mean, that's quite the story to get there, but it makes sense. I understand. The I think part of it for me, equating or relating the idea behind Stoicism, keeping your emotions under control, keeping a cool head under fire, all of these things definitely seems to play to the military, handbook, in terms of how you have to control yourself and behave and so on and so forth when you're out in the field or even in the pre-planning and those types of things. Um, I was a little surprised to see some of the topics that came up and around the book in terms of asking questions like what defines a just war,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that from somebody who's on active duty still.
Yeah.
That's I mean, power to you, brother. But is that a conversation you want to be having right now?
You bet it is.
All right.
Yeah. So basically, this is a tough one, but I think that we need to meet it. So everyone in whenever you go through the service academy and everything, you take ethics at some point, and you learn about just war theory, and everyone kind of rolls their eyes, and it's just war theory is the stuff that was hashed out, kind of it materialized in the Middle Ages. It was under the old, basically kind of coalesced, and people didn't start saying just war theory until, the old Catholic philosophers like Thomas Aquinas. Before him was Augustine of Hippo, or what Catholics call Saint Augustine. But those guys, the at the time, that was the Christian philosophers of the time, and those guys did a lot of reasoning over when does a good person go to war? Can that exist? Can that be true? And yes, it can, is the conclusion. And okay, under what conditions does a good person go to war, or a good country go to war? That's just war theory. Okay, and now you get your young soldiers and your young sailors and everything, and they say, oh, this is boring, like I don't want to talk about philosophy, and it's not interesting, this is not, I don't care, and I say, okay, all right, tough guy, all warriors are murderers, and war is murder, and anyone who would participate in it is a party to murder. And of course they will say, no, that's not true. And I'll say, all right, tough guy, why is that true? And blah, 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 you got to think about why. That's what philosophy is. That's what philosophers do, is they ask the questions why, and they try to figure out why they think what they think. That's basically, philosophy is nothing if not saying, what do you think? Are you sure? And why? And so the just war theory piece of it is getting at the questions of, when is that what a good person does? And so, the lazy way to think about it is war is hell. It's this necessary evil. But if it's necessary, I argue, then it's not evil. It's just the appropriate thing to do. If it is what a good person would do, then it's not evil. It just may be something that you really would like not to do, but the circumstances compel you, if that is the right thing to do. And pacifism is an ideology. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad there are pacifists in the world, but it doesn't have the moral high ground. It likes to pretend to the moral high ground, but pacifism doesn't do anything to stop a genocide whenever the use of force is necessary to do it. Pacifism doesn't keep the sea lanes open if you have a nefarious actor who wants to shut down world trade or coerce somebody else. Pacifism doesn't stop nuclear proliferation. Pacifism, there are occasions where a good country goes to war and good people go to war. And you got to think through those things. That's just war theory. And so, is this something you really want to think about? You bet. Because I spend a lot of time sitting on the most powerful weapon ever conceived by man. And I have a lot of sailors around me who are also part of that weapon, part of that organism. And we like to think that no one thinks about this stuff and thinks through this stuff. And that works for some people, but it doesn't work for others. And that's not how I'm wired. If you want to be the kind of guy that just says, I'm just going to focus on the job and not think about the implications of all this, like, okay, that works for some people. It doesn't work for me. I feel when I'm walking through what we call Sherwood Forest, which is this, these giant missile tubes. That's just and it just seems to go on forever. And it dawns on you like, this is a really big deal that I'm a part of here. And this is a big responsibility, and it's a big moral responsibility. I'm absolutely going to think through those things. And I come away thinking, having thought through those things and knowing what I know about all the procedures and all the rigor that goes into how the procedures work, and all the way to the top, to the authorization of everything. Knowing what I know, I am confident at a moral level that what I'm doing is the right thing, and that if I get an order, it's going to be the right thing to follow it, because I've been educated on the systems that play into that. But I do
Well,
think it's an important thing to think through.
I'm glad, to be honest with you. I was posing that question devil's advocate wise, but I appreciate you stepping up the way you did just now to embrace that question. I'm sure everybody was on the edge of their seat listening to that answer too. So I love that. And I know what you mean very often, and I see it just on the internet, for crying out loud, with where stoicism, because it's a control of your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
it gets described not only as emotionless, but it also does get confused with pacifism.
Mm.
Like, oh, well, we just want peace all the time. No, it means you're thinking about it. You're not
Yeah.
just reacting, type of thing.
Yeah, if
So,
you're in a situation where the right thing to do to go to war is to go to war, and you say, but I don't do that because I'm a pacifist. Well, what you're doing is you're deflecting moral and physical burdens onto somebody else who is going to go,
mhm,
because somebody has to do it. And B, you're not preventing a greater harm. And you're hiding behind an ideology
yeah,
versus actually thinking through it. Now, I'm not pretending like there's just a lot of pacifists out there. There aren't, but it's. I think most moral philosophers will agree that pacifism is basically hard pacifism like that is indefensible, and there is a long spectrum of positions in between that hard, kind of indefensible pacifism and like hard militarism, and
mhm,
you can reasonable people can disagree on the appropriate use of force and so on, and the appropriate resourcing of defense and so on. And I don't get into any of that, and I do what I'm told. I follow my orders, but I think about it.
there it
and
is.
and and I and you know and I retain the capacity to disobey if I got orders that I thought were immoral. And so does everybody else, by the way. That's part of
Sure.
being a human being and being a reasoning human being, is that you retain that capacity and that choice. And when you don't get to just say, well, I was just following orders. Like, that hasn't worked since the Nuremberg trials. If you are ordered to go slaughter a village or something like that, you don't get to just do that and then say, well, I followed orders. Like, no, that's not going to work.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I understand. So the idea behind Stoicism as a warrior philosophy sounds like just a couple things I want to throw at you, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say about them. And the first of which is you're encouraging the warrior to think about what it is they're doing,
You bet.
and that way, I think the positive side of that is that way they can actually be sort of secure and feel confident about carrying out those orders because they've taken the
Man, you
time to
nailed
thought
it.
about it.
Gosh, so many people I can talk to for hours and they don't get that point right there. That
Awesome.
having thought through the stuff, I get, William, why are you telling people they can disobey orders? I'm like, man, they're gonna disobey. I'm not giving them permission to do anything. If they get orders that are immoral to them, they're going to. So it's better to think through that stuff and be confident in your positions, and be confident in who you are as a person, so that you don't have those moral crises when it matters.
Right. That's a
Anyway,
strong
I cut
position.
you off, but
I know
that's just a,
it's.
gosh, you nailed it with the confidence thing.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you cut me off. It's your book, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just over here coming up with stuff. So,
Yeah.
but I think that that's incredibly strong. I mean, that seems like it would just make the warrior, right? So it internally fortified on what they're doing, and so that there's no question. And if you're going to go into any kind of a battle or conflict, the last thing you want is to be having questions and doubts that prevent you from acting when you have to act. So it sounds like it would be very, very strong to encourage that in people.
Right.
Yeah.
And and you said stoicism as being without emotion. That's a misunderstanding. It's really about understanding and domesticating your emotions, and thinking through the reasons that you think what you think. So a good example is, if someone cuts me off in traffic and I get mad, or I'm worried about this important TPS report that is due tomorrow, and like, oh no, my job, is it going to be secure? And the stoic position on these items is, it's not those events that worry me or anger me. It is my own judgment about those things that angers me or worries me. I am the one who's doing that. I'm the one who's thinking those thoughts and assenting to the impression that something bad is happening or something bad may happen, when in fact, those things are all really powerless to harm me in any way. And why is it powerless to harm me? That is because in the stoic position, virtue is what matters. Virtue is the keystone concept of stoic philosophy, is virtue is the sole good. Okay, virtue is what matters. And if it is not virtue, then it is ultimately irrelevant to me, to my judgment of my situation. It doesn't merit my emotional investment. And so the question then is how do I know what is virtue and what isn't, or what merits my emotions? What is something that reflects on my virtue or doesn't? And the test for that is, do I have control over this thing? Okay. In
Hmm.
popular Stoic discourse, they call that the dichotomy of control. In the book I explain why I don't actually use that phrase. I prefer the metaphor of a knife that I call the Stoic knife, and I explain why that is, because it works like a philosophical razor. Basically, is it cuts off things that don't matter, because if it's outside of my control, it's a non-moral factor. And so things like this is an extreme position too. This is kind of a radical claim, but this is the Stoic philosophy, is that if it is beyond my control, then it is not me. It does not reflect on me. I can do things, I can do appropriate things to try to affect this situation as is appropriate morally and logically and rationally to my situation. But whatever comes of those actions, that's beyond my control. And therefore, it's morally indifferent. It doesn't reflect on my virtue. So wealth is a good example. Uh, in the Stoic position, wealth is an indifferent. I can do everything right and still wind up poor. If I've done everything right, or really if I am doing everything right in this moment, that is what matters. What I have done in the past, I can't control that. That might as well be some other guy. Okay. That guy in the past, I am not locked into that fate to continue being that guy in the past. I am my sense of moral agency in this instant. And the appropriate actions that lie before me are what I have to decide in this instant. Okay. Now, they may be informed by my past. I may have a debt to pay, or, something to repair. I may do something to affect the future as appropriate. I may plant a crop or build a house or study for a test, or all those things that are appropriate to my moral situation. But then if I fail the test, I could study for the test and still fail for it. fail it, and that I can't control that. I can do my best, but whatever happens outside of my control is a non-moral factor. And that is a key point of Stoic philosophy, is being able to separate those non-moral factors and basically cut them off from my emotional investment. Now, that does not mean that I should not have and indulge emotions, especially in my relationships, because those things are appropriate to being a human being. There's a moral function in my interactions with other humans. The Stoics believe that humans are built for each other. No man is an island. You're part of a society. You have a responsibility to participate in that society. So, the Stoic idea of a wise, ultimate wise person isn't someone who goes and sits on a mountain in a loincloth and issues wise platitudes. The Stoic ideal wise man is a contributor to society, a pillar of the community type. That's how Stoics think of these things, is you have to view yourself in the context of your community. And in the book, I basically extrapolate that onto the military service and in various ways, and look at how the basically society works like an organism, just like a military unit, be it a Marine platoon or a warship, acts as an organism of individual people, and you have a role to play within that.
Nice. This is a philosophy that you have sort of, constructed here, and that you subscribe to. The book, the reason behind the book. Who are you writing the book to or for?
This is a question that makes me laugh every time, because it's really wild that I was able to find a publisher, because it is a weird book. Okay.
Okay.
Because it is very academic. It's very heavily researched. And when you read it, you would think of this as a college textbook. So this, I can just to be honest with the listeners, I don't want a bunch of people to go, get this book and then give me a bunch of 2-star reviews on Amazon because like it was hard. This is a hard book. Okay,
All
I'm
right.
letting you know that right now. This shouldn't be anyone's like first Stoicism book. It's more for someone who is interested and maybe someone who already knows it. You don't have to know anything about Stoicism about it, but you're probably not going to enjoy it if you don't. But the book is written it's for active duty military. Part of that is because no one would have published me if I didn't have a reason to have written this book. Because they, immediately when you
Right.
write kind of an academic book, they want to know, okay, where'd you get your PhD? And the submarine force of hard knocks,
Right.
is not the right answer. But if I say, okay, well, this is a book for the military that speaks about and that was kind of like the strategy writing it. But it turned out like whenever it's done, I'm like, man, someone really did need to write this book. I'm really glad I did. I'd say 90% of it is just breaking down Stoicism, and explaining it in kind of a militarily efficient manner of like, I'm not going to dumb this down, but I'm not going to waste time. I'm not going to talk about a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. And a lot of academic writing is just unreadable. And they kind of, I'm of the opinion, especially academic philosophy, that they often get away with just writing badly under the guise of like, well, we have to explain everything. That's just how philosophy is written. And I'm just like, this is garbage. Like, you're just writing poorly, and you're not trying to make this flow logically or trying to make this, comprehensible, because, you can get away with saying, well, you're just not sophisticated enough to understand it. And like, that's not how I write, but I definitely don't dumb anything down. And so the thing that I get is, hey, so you're writing this for people who are in the military and also really interested in philosophy. Well, that's like 5 or 6 people. and my answer to that is no, it's quite a bit more than that.
Right.
That it might be 5 or 6 people if you believe the stereotypes, but if people who believe that have never really interacted with real warfighters. But I can tell you that the real warfighter is generally a smart person, generally sophisticated, and generally very thoughtful, and creative, reflecting the society they're drawn from. So, basically they're young people, often young men who want to think deeply. That's who the book's for.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm sorry that you've been asked that a few times, but
Well,
it's
it always cracks me up though, because it is a weird book.
I understand. I
Yeah.
really do. It's unique. It's not weird. It's unique,
Yeah,
but
but it's
that's a
like
good thing.
what publishers, like, they don't. I've learned so much about the publishing world in the last couple of few in the last year. I've learned so much, and one of the things is, like, they don't want to mess with anything that they can't figure out what shelf to put it on.
Right.
And like, it needs to go in military history, or it needs to go in self help, or it needs to go in politics, or whatever. And I can't believe that I was able to get find a publisher, and the way that I did. Check this out. I haven't told anyone on this on a podcast. So you have, like, I basically wrote this book for this one publisher to publish, because I was just so sure they were going to publish it, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't know, that's weird. I don't want to publish that." And I'm just like broken, and I'm like, "That was my whole plan. I spent 10 years on this thing, you know." But anyway, I submitted it through. If you write something, in the military, if you're going to publish something, you're supposed to submit it for a security classification review. And
Sure.
so I went ahead and did that. And the guy, at the Pentagon. And so there's an office at the Pentagon that does this. And so I kind of forgot about it, because they spent like a month reading it, and the guy eventually emails me and saying, "Hey, your book is cleared. And P.S. I used to teach history at West Point, and the cadets would have really, really resonated with this. I think this is really great." And so I replied, like, "Haha, yeah, LOL. Like, if only anyone would publish this weird ass book, you know." and he called me at my desk, and he's like, "Okay, you did not hear this from me, but called this lady, or emailed this lady at this publisher, and maybe they're open-minded, maybe they go for it, because, I think that."
Wow.
And that's who I went with. And I love this publisher. They're just great. Casemate Publishers. They're a military history publisher, but they're like, "Hey, we really think this would resonate with our readers." And it's just like, if that wouldn't have, that was a life-changing recommendation. If that
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened, then I would be, up a creek. you know?
So much what goes into that too. If you hadn't like made the joke about not being able to find the
Yeah.
publisher, if you'd just been like, "Okay, great, thanks," you know what I
Yeah. I was so
mean?
lucky.
You don't get the return
Uh,
email.
yeah.
That's
But I tell you what, that keeping in mind how lucky I am there, and this applies at so many things in life that have gone well for me, that could have gone a completely different way for reasons completely beyond my power. So anytime I look at my life and I want to congratulate myself and pat myself on the back for, how great things are going and what great decisions I've made and how hard I've worked, I look around and, like, there are people working their butts off everywhere who don't have it as good as I do, you
yeah.
know. And I am just so privileged and so blessed to be able to wear the uniform and do the job that I do and work with the people that I work with and be involved in something that I think is important and something that I enjoy doing. And, have a wonderful family and wonderful children, and just have this wonderful life. There's so many things that could have gone off the rails at any point to cause it to go differently.
For sure. Living from a place of gratitude is never a bad thing, brother.
It's a very healthy way of thinking through things.
Yeah.
And that is also happens to be a tenet of the Stoic philosophy is, what you often hear the phrase that an attitude of gratitude. It is, another way it is put is the phrase amor fati, or it basically means love of fate. It's a French term it's a philosophical expression that is often applied to the way the Stoics look at things. But basically, the Stoics have a kind of a metaphysical respect for fate as God. The Stoics basically see the universe and all of the events in it, and all the events that occur, as manifesting the will and the wisdom of that universe of God. And for the Stoics, the universe and God are the same thing.
Right.
And wrapped up in that is all the laws of physics, all causality, time, all those things are manifesting that universal wisdom. And so that attitude of respect for the events as they occur, and basically a gratefulness for them, is built into the philosophical position and built into the logic that they think through of how they should regard their situation.
Yeah. I love the way you just explained that too and broke it down because I mean, if I had a buck for every time I heard somebody talk about how, oh, well, Stoics don't believe in God, I just would be like, are you joking? I mean, it's all over the internet, unfortunately. It's one of those where, especially the very strict biblical interpretation folks, are like, well, that's really not what the Bible says. And I'm like, actually, it does. If you really read the Bible and you really read the Stoic philosophy, it
Yeah,
actually does say it both places. But it's just funny the way it gets twisted. Like everything that has even a hint of masculinity in it does
yeah.
get twisted around by the wrong
and
folks. But
and it, and
anyway,
and it will, and you
yeah,
gotta roll with that and just say, okay, well, I'm not threatened by that. Okay. The So there are points of incompatibility between Stoic philosophy and for instance Christianity, and this stuff got sorted out in like the Middle Ages, and the determinism, for instance, the belief that whatever occurs is has been determined for all
mm,
time, and has been, it was always going to happen this way, and there was nothing you could do to change what occurs. That's called determinism, and that is a core Stoic belief, and it has implications in other positions in their physics and things like that. And that is a most Christians, or particularly like the Christian theologians and philosophers, will say that's not a, that particular belief is not compatible with Christianity. The nice thing about philosophy is that you can just say like, well, I don't agree with that, but this over here is valuable, and you can do that,
right.
because the philosophers, they're not prophets, they're not magic, they're just guys feeling around in the dark trying to use their natural faculty of reason to figure out things. And the Stoic philosophers were, they were hundreds of years before there was Jesus. you know so the and whenever you trace it through, the Apostle Paul was very well informed by Hellenistic philosophers, and very well influenced by the Greek style of philosophy. He was an educated man, and that was the education of the time, that and the environment that he grew up in as a Roman, uh, educated person. Anyway, a good book on that, a good book on the parallels between Christianity and Stoicism, is called The Porch and the Cross. That's I'll recommend that one for your Christian readers who might have interest in where these things parallel. And then in my book, I kind of provide some references to some other things on that. It's not what the book's about, but I acknowledge it. Basically, the way the book is written is we start at the beginning and we say like, okay, we're gonna play a game here, and I'm gonna present all of these ideas as if they're true and if I believe all of them. And I'm gonna encourage you, reader, to think about how they work together, how they don't work, what doesn't work with what you think. Pick and choose, but please approach it like an eclectic. That's what I recommend. I think that's the only like philosophically honest way to think through things, is to do the thinking that says like, I agree with that, I don't agree with that. Are those beliefs compatible, and why? And doing
Yeah,
those thinking through why, I think, is an important part of doing the work.
sure. Nice. I gotta say, I'm fascinated by all this, and I love the idea. I cannot wait to read the book. I really can't. I think it's going to be great, and so I'm going to have to get on Amazon and put my name in that pre-order spot that you have on there.
I would
There,
love
it,
that.
there is a
That's
place to
super helpful.
pre-order the book. That's right. We'll
uh,
have the link in the show notes to go pre-order the book ahead of time because it's a November 1st, 2025 release date. Yes,
yeah, that's right.
perfect.
It releases in UK in September. I have no idea why there's a difference there. It has something to do with publisher distribution network magic. I don't know. But for some reason the Brits are going to get it early. you know?
Oh, okay. All right. That's like 18 jokes just went through my head. You know what? Nope. None
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
None of them. We're going to choose not to. Let's keep moving forward. Um, Just in the short time I've gotten to know you here a little bit, you don't strike me as the kind of guy who's doing all this for just one thing. Is this the beginning of, some sort of movement, additional projects, something like that you have going? Or is it really you put everything you have into this book and you're just glad to get it done?
Well, it is for now. Basically, I've got the rest of this year on shore duty while I'm at the Pentagon. Looking at how expensive ships are, and that's my time that I can kind of promote this project and do other writing. And then after that, the Navy's going to expect me to get rowing again. And
Ah,
I'm whenever they want me back at sea, there's not a lot of writing that goes on there. I've kind of you got to
gotcha.
pour everything into that job. But my overall ambition, kind of the project right now of what I'm after is I hope that this book nudges military culture writ large in a positive direction. And kind of one of the themes of the book is that moral virtue is is good and is cool. Whenever you think about people think about morality, they don't want to the young guys that I hope read this book, they don't want to talk about morality because morality that's like helping little old ladies across the street and sharing is caring and being a nice guy. I don't want to do all that. I want to be a bad dude. I want to be formidable. I want to be industrious. I want to be brave. I want to be intelligent and all those things that make a guy admirable. I'm like, dude, that's morality. That's what that is. you know and that is the classic Roman kind of understanding of these things. Virtue is being what a human is supposed to be. And the original the Romans basically, or actually the Greeks before that, this dates back to Socrates. This is before the Stoics, and the Stoics inherited it. Is they basically broke up virtue into the four, what we call now the cardinal virtues. That's wisdom, courage, temperance or moderation, but basically self-control and justice. Those are the four qualities, according to these ancient thinkers, of a good person. And basically any other quality, be it industriousness, sense of humor, generosity, whatever the thing is, any other good quality of a person is a derivative of those four qualities, the cardinal virtues. It's derived from some combination of those. Think of like primary colors of red, yellow, and blue, make all the shades and hues of everything else. And that's kind of how the cardinal virtues work. And what makes them special is they can't be reduced any further. And you see those cardinal virtues adopted by all kinds of philosophies that came later, including Christianity. The Catholic Church adopted the four cardinal virtues, and you'll see it in churches everywhere in Europe, where you've got the statues. Justice is always holding the scales, and moderation is represented by a woman like pouring one liquid into another, and things like that. Like these metaphors are very useful and have been extremely influential through history. The reason we study the classic philosophers, and the reason it's valuable to do so, is because they get at the truths that cut through time and were true 2,000 years ago and will be true 2,000 years from now. That's the stuff I like to write about. That's why I don't talk about things like politics and the news and stuff like that, because it's not going to be relevant tomorrow. you know
Right.
I want to talk about stuff that's going to be relevant hundreds and thousands of years from now, and that stuff that's just always true about being a human being. The reason it's good is the same reason that the classic songs from the 60s, 70s, and 80s are still good classic songs. It's survivorship bias. We don't talk about all the songs that sucked. We just like we don't talk about all the philosophical ideas that sucked that came from 2000 years ago. We talk about
Right.
the good ones. That's why it's good to study the classics. So
Nice. I love it. I love your perspective on this stuff. It's fascinating and entertaining at the same time. I love your delivery.
thank
So
you. I appreciate
I
that.
really do.
You can tell I'm a nerd for this stuff, man. I just love. Love
It's
talking about it.
you can tell that you really have done your homework though. I gotta give you all the credit in the world. I mean, you're not just over here, BSing. You really
No.
and truly know what you're talking about. So, the little bit that I know is just sort of like being dwarfed right now and I'm glad because I
Well,
didn't
I
write the book. You did.
yeah. Well, dude, I think you will like the book. I do
I'm looking
think you'll
forward
enjoy
to
it.
it. I really am. All right, so we've got Stoicism as a warrior philosophy coming out on November 1st. Listen, we've unpacked a lot. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and kind of throw it to you to give us a good wrap up here. Is there anything that I didn't ask you? Is there anything that we talked about and you want to make sure you did go back and double down on? Or is there maybe something you want to leave behind, a nugget or something like that you want to leave for our listeners? The floor is yours for the last couple minutes here, and go for it. Anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, so basically, I'll just take the opportunity to recommend a couple of books. If someone's interested in Stoicism right now, you don't have to buy any books. There's tons of stuff online. Reddit's got a good Stoicism community, but the problem is that there's a lot of garbage online too. A good book I would recommend as an entry point is Donald Robertson's How to Think Like a Roman Emperor. Basically focuses on Marcus Aurelius of gladiator fame, who is one of the most famous Stoics. That would be a good entry point. And basically, if that resonates with you, then when my book comes out in November, that would be a good follow on. And again, the Porch on the Cross. I wish I remembered who the author is, but we can throw that stuff in the show notes. And
Absolutely.
I definitely, if you haven't read about Stockdale, you need to read about Stockdale. We'll link to an article there and why that's significant. And it has the article that I'm gonna link you to has a lot of implications for leaders and leadership too. That he is the quintessential example of courageous moral fortitude within the military service, and I think everyone who is interested in leadership should read this, and
Nice.
that's what I'll leave you with.
It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Commander William C. Spears, here as William C. Spears on the show today. Brother, thank you for bringing all this, for doing all the work you've done, and for putting out a product that I think is going to be extremely influential, not just with our military, but with men in general who want to take this and apply it to their lives. I'm really looking forward to seeing what it is when it comes out. And I thank you for being on the show, man.
Hey man, I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been great.
Thank you so much. Folks, this has been another absolutely awesome episode of the Power Man podcast. The reason we have such powerful men on here with such powerful messages is because we are united in your drive and your hope to regain your power and to become, a better provider, a better protector, a better leader tomorrow than you are today. To become a better husband, a better father, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason that we want that for you is because you have value and you're worth it. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.